So now that we have some kind of grounds, some of the grounds for even like having a conversation today on using like Verifiable Credential or SSI for production level COVID solution. So let's talk about a little bit more where we can use this technology for COVID specifically and how it is better. I think someone is asking how it is better, how this better than other digital credentialing technology. So I would like to invite Riley to briefly comment on this, how this is better. Like, let's start with this, because like someone already asking how this is better than other digital credentials. Why Verifiable Credential is a better kind of option in this context.
Yeah, so there's a few things to comment on here, and keeping it for a pretty sort of for a non-technical audience. I mean, there's a lot of technical reasons, and that the technologists and purists will geek out about how cool this stuff is. But for practically speaking, the reason verifiable credentials are unique is that you can so individuals can prove something about themselves directly without needing it to be sort of verified by some third party. From the other perspective, businesses or organizations can verify, or individuals, frankly, can verify things without needing some integration to some third party verifier or anything like that, right? So what this practically could look like is, the easy example is there's maybe a driving license division that would issue a driving license to somebody, and they could take that driver's license to a bank, and the bank could verify that it's actually a driver's license and it's legitimate, and that the attributes inside were vouched for by the bank, and all of these things, and that it hasn't been tampered with, and it's not revoked, and all these things about that credential, without having to have an integration to the DMV itself to ask, right? So this is really interesting when you look at sort of scaling these systems like Peter's talking about with these travel use cases. Imagine if you needed to have an integration with every laboratory in the world in order to verify, that their certificates are legitimate. There would probably be some third party that would step in and say, create all the integrations with all the laboratories and then charge a big fee to perform that verification or something. What Verifiable Credentials allows us to do is solve that technical problem, right, about the verification and integrations. Then the problem becomes maybe a policy problem, and that's what we're talking about here. It's what Peter's talking about. How do you know who to trust? It's a governance and policy issue, but the technical issue is sort of solved. And so I guess does that answer the question, Lucy?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Riley. Peter, do you want to add a little bit here? Because I know that when you're talking about the Unlock project, privacy by design is something like your kind of one of your unique value propositions. So how when you're talking about this, how people are responding to the privacy,
yeah,
the value?
I think one of the typical use cases I always use when explaining how verifiable credentials can give you privacy is in the Netherlands. If you're buying alcohol, you're allowed to buy it when you're over 18, and you need to ID yourself at a shop, and typically you show your driver's license. In this case, the driver's license authority doesn't do any checks because the document is self-sovereign, but still you're sharing a lot of information in this credential. For instance, you're sharing your where you've been born and your name and your birth date. And based on your birth date, they can check against the policy, are you older than 18? If you're talking about verified credentials, you can also make credentials that just state, I am a existing person that is older than 18, right? And that is something you can prove. And you can prove that without the organization that has provided this credential knowing that you're buying alcohol, because it's none of their business. And I think this is sort of this is a very basic explanation of what we're talking about, privacy by design. I think sometimes a better word is minimalization of the data minimalization, only showing the questions that you really, only showing the information you really want to share. And also in verifiable credentials, we're always talking about it's like a question and answer game. Because actually the way Unlock works, it's when you arrive somewhere with your credential, somebody asks for your credential. So the first step is somebody says, hi, I am on the street would be, "Hi, I'm a police officer. Can I please see your see some information?" Then you say, "Prove me you're a police officer. Why are you asking me this information?" And then they show a badge and they say, "It's because you're speeding." And then you present your information. We want to achieve the same in the digital world. So if you walk into a hospital and they ask for a health certificate, first they say, "We are a hospital. We have this is our policy. We identify ourselves with our, it's nicely signed with our digital signatures. And this is the question we ask you with this goal." This is also the core of the GDPR. You always need to state why you're asking information. And then it's up to the holder or the person having the test done, if he's willing to share his information. So he knows the information he's sharing. He also knows the policy he's sharing it towards. So he already actually knows the answer before he shares the information. So also if the answer is no, you cannot come in, there's actually no need to even share your credentials. You can just walk away. And these are two examples of what I mean by privacy by design. And also the fact that if somebody asks you, "Can I please see your health certificate to enter a bar?" In the Netherlands at this point, this would be against a lot of regulations. The person has the information that a bar asked them for a health certificate. And with that information, they can go to the privacy authority in the Netherlands, who could then take action. Without revealing any information about yourself, you have these information stored in your wallet. So these are actually 3 examples then of what we are trying to add here, because at least in the Netherlands, health certificates are a very, very tricky topic, privacy-wise, ethically. It's sort of we are now only starting to understand what are the impacts of the COVID crisis, and we are also still struggling with what are the solutions. So people are. Every idea is sort of met with both a lot of enthusiasm and also a lot of skepticism. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why we're also aiming at this privacy by design approach. But there's also a bit what we call ethics by design. And we're saying, well, in some cases, it might not be ethically correct to ask people for a health certificate. You can get negative effects in society. You can exclude people from public spaces, for instance. We don't think that's a good idea. And also you can use credentials, and I can go on about how you could do that technically, but you can use credentials to make sure that only verified verifiers are able to ask you those kind of questions. So that's also how we try to incorporate some of the ethical principles of actually of our society into the technology. And that is quite new and I think that's very exciting. And we have some nice cooperation there with 2 Dutch universities which we together try to figure this out, because we think this is one of the points, at least in Europe, where these sort of the technologies at this point, sort of the contacts tracing apps in Europe are at this point not being adopted too much, because they're not so well designed around the sort of European values, you could say, which are privacy and which are the sort of individualism, and governments cannot mandate that you use a certain app or give away certain information. So that's our direction.
Cool. Thank you, both of you. So I hope it's like from our perspective, it's like the privacy, like the use of verifiable credential for privacy protection for individuals is definitely a huge kind of plus compared to other alternatives. And also in terms of, because it is at the hand of the user. So it's not only like you have to do it again and again. There are also a convenience kind of benefits when it comes to you have to go to different places to get access to different places. And I think we've talked, like Peter has mentioned a lot about house credentials. And what I want to kind of show everyone here is just beyond house credentials, what else we can think about, or how this technology can be used. So here. So what I'm trying to do here is to throw some thoughts to encourage you to think broader about how this technology can help beyond just having like some kind of like path towards warehouse related credentials. So here are 3 groups of use cases. So I summarize it based on the different business scenarios. So essentially they're all access management, either physical or digital. So the first group is where a lot of conversations are happening, whether it's about house credentials or other type of credentials. The idea is to get you to public spaces where access public resources. And what I want to focus a little bit more on the second and the third one. So different from group one, the second group is about certain workers are required to fulfill their duties at different locations, which may cause safety and security issues if we don't manage their access well. And not only safety and security, but also in search for certain professions, certain positions, like speed is also very important. So that's the reason why like NHS, National Health Services in England, are beginning trials of digital staff passports in coming weeks to make it easier for health workers to move between organizations during the coronavirus pandemic, so that they can get authenticated quickly without necessary bureaucracy. So another like kind of like scenario is, think about we're now because we're all like staying at home, we need a lot of stuff delivered to our door. So that is why we have seen more cases where people get robbed by others, pretending to be people that they're not, right? So therefore, a certain authentication process in place becomes more necessary than before. So that's like another like kind of area where we're thinking probably there are use cases where variable business cases. And the third group is about because we won't be able to access many services, either because we can't go out where they're closed. So even when things get better, so we'll still at least have to stay cautious for a long period of time. So that is giving many online service platforms such as Doctor on Demand to survive, to thrive. So, but are those businesses ready to take a huge influx of new service providers, therapists or doctors? So while people are in desperate need of those services. So this is like our thoughts regarding how verifiable credentials can help, as many of those service providers are listing themselves, online, and not only on one place. Think about if you're a doctor, so you're definitely not trying to get on one platform. You want to list yourself on different platforms. So you have to do like the same process probably again and again and again. Hopefully, they're doing it properly. So if there's some kind of system in place that can help you get on board faster, and also like for the platform to make sure that the person who claims to be a doctor actually has the qualifications. So that's where another like a group of use cases like we're thinking about. And I don't know if you have noticed, so many of the use cases are not just like COVID. It can be beyond just for COVID. It still have value like when COVID, and hopefully COVID can end soon. So I don't know if there are any like other use cases or things like the two of you want to add here. Anything like you want to add?
And there's a lot of contactless stuff that we're seeing, right? So think, like you've mentioned, access management to buildings or services, right? Access to prescriptions in a contactless way, proving that you've been prescribed something. There's use cases we're seeing in the supply chain vertical, regarding essential supply chains and optimizing things for this new normal. And so I just echo what you're saying, right? There are people who are interested in doing health certificates or whatever for COVID test results and things like that. Immunity passports, those types of things are being thought about and worked on, but I would even say that they are actually a minority, a small minority of the total things that people are working on using verifiable credentials to address the myriad of issues that are risen by the current pandemic.
Cool, thank you, Riley. Peter, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I know there's also cases, for instance, in the Netherlands, there's a lot of subsidies now being granted to people working in certain sectors, or businesses working active in certain sectors, for instance, bars and events and sports, and they're all, due to our lockdown, they're now all in a very bad shape financially. And it's actually quite hard to prove that you are a business working in such a field, and that you comply to, I don't know how many other rules that are there now. And I think that's also a very good case for credentials. So it's not credentials of people then, but credentials of legal entities, for instance, of businesses. But also the self-employed. How can you prove as a self-employed that you are actually working in such a field? That can be quite hard. So it's hard to prove to those systems. And in the Netherlands, it took weeks. And I think there were like 50,000 calls a day at these call centers for people trying to get through to get this kind of money, this support money. And I think it's very important that people get it fast. And in this case, again, you could actually run the whole policy and already see if you comply, and then if you send it in, you can get it instantly. So it could greatly speed up the transaction times in those kind of systems.
Thank you. So to be very honest, having worked in emerging technologies for some time, so I'm kind of like tired of the word like use cases, because everything is very conceptual at the use case level. So more action need to be taken to validate are those use cases actually can be turned into viable business cases. Not necessarily we're saying making money out of it. Are those use cases worth built on so that we can actually deliver value to those people who are in need?